everyone. Welcome back inside the UC Health Training Center for another episode of Broncos Now. I'm your host, Sydney Jones, and we are now just one day out from the Broncos' final preseason game at Empower Field at Mile High versus the Minnesota Vikings, which means there's just one game left for General Manager George Paton and company to evaluate this team's roster ahead of the final round of cuts next Tuesday. Offensive coordinator Justin Outen details what he'll be looking for on Saturday and what the key to evaluating some of these younger guys is.
The number one is just to see how fast they can play now with the plan that we've been practicing the last couple of days. They got a lot of reps under their belt, just putting those guys in situations where they can play fast. Again, you're going to face a different style of defense each and every week. So with these guys, they're hungry and they're ready to rock. The preparation's been awesome. They've had extra meeting time this week. We repped a lot towards the back end of practice as well, so we're hoping they fly around.
And special teams coordinator Dwayne Stukes discusses the voice he will have throughout this final cut-down process.
I don't know how much of a voice I have, but I am going to express my opinion. Obviously, if we want to get to being one of the elite units in the NFL, we need to keep quality guys around that can play at a high level. So I'm going to tell George my opinion. I'm going to tell Coach Hackett my opinion. Hopefully it has some influence on some of those back-end roster guys.
Like I discussed on yesterday's show, Brett Rypien will start in this preseason finale for the Broncos, and head coach Nathaniel Hackett details what he likes about Brett's skill set.
Brett's one of those guys that when he has that perfect footwork, when he has a complete understanding of the play and what he's trying to accomplish, he's unbelievably efficient. And I think we've seen that this past game, even the first game versus Dallas. I mean, he did do a lot of really good things. So just the rhythm, the understanding of using your feet, your hitch to be able to make you more accurate, he's really bought into that, and you can see that up to this point.
We heard yesterday from defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero and his disappointment with the defense's performance versus Buffalo. He shares what his message to the defense will be this week and what he hopes to see from them.
There's a lot of things. It's more physicality, it's more urgency, more competitiveness, better coaching. It's all of it. We all got to be better.
Now joining me here in the studio is Broncos lead writer Eric DeLalla. Eric, appreciate you joining me on the show as always.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, it is the Broncos' final preseason game tomorrow. Finally, preseason is coming to an end. Eric, what do you think about this team's effort just over the past couple weeks and their progress throughout the preseason?
Yeah, I mean, you've seen a ton of progress from this team. Obviously, it's a new offense. It's a new defense in some ways, and that the terminology is different. This team has had a lot to accomplish. And, adding Russell Wilson is obviously a huge move, something that makes this team a lot better. But there was still a lot of work to be done. And I think the Broncos over the last few weeks, both in training camp, in the offseason program, workouts at Russell Wilson's house in in San Diego, preseason games against the Cowboys, against the Bills, and now this week against the Vikings, we've seen them take strides. We've seen them put in the work. It's been a non-traditional training camp in terms of the way that Nathaniel Hackett has structured it with some off days. But I think they've done enough. And obviously the work's not done yet, but they're in a good spot as we get closer to the regular season.
I know there's a lot of things to watch for tomorrow, but what specifically will you be watching for, or who specifically will you be watching?
Yeah, I think there's obviously a few guys that still have a chance to make this roster. You think about the quarterback position for one. Brett Rypien's going to get that opportunity to make his first start of the preseason. Josh Johnson's still pushing for that role as well. So that's a critical battle to watch. But then I think you look at outside linebacker, you look at defensive line, you look at cornerback, all of those spots on this defense, you're not just competing for a spot against the guys on the roster right now, but also all these players are going to get waived or released here in the coming days. The pro personnel department is going to be looking at every single one of those players. So if you're a guy who's on, you're battling to make this roster, you're on the bubble, you've got to make a case not just against the guys you're fighting on this roster, but everywhere else across the league to make sure that George Paton doesn't bring in somebody else. And so defensively, that's what I'm looking for. And then, at the wide receiver position, which one of those guys is going to solidify himself? There might only be one or two spots up for grabs behind Montrell Washington. Who's going to take that spot?
Eric, you mentioned Brett Rypien and Josh Johnson. Where do you think those two guys stand as, this will be the final battle to try and get that spot behind Russell Wilson?
Yeah, it's hard to say exactly what the coaches are thinking, but what I think is that Brett Rypien's going to have a really great game. And that's nothing against Brett, but I think that these guys have been pretty even throughout training camp. And because of Josh Johnson's experience, he's been with 14, 15 different teams. He's been in this league for a long time. Because of that experience, I think a tie might go to him, just because Brett doesn't have as much starting experience, just one game against the Jets back in 2020, 4 career regular season games. So he's going to have to go out, I think, and really wow in this opportunity. And that's not to say he can't do it, because I really do think he has the talent. He took a step from Dallas to Buffalo in terms of his performance, but I think he's going to have to do something special to earn this job.
Well, Eric, you always hope to see a win, but it is the preseason, so really doesn't matter too much. So overall, what do you think a successful final preseason game would really look like for this team?
Yeah, I think you just want to see some pride from these guys, and that's not to question their effort, because I think everyone was working really hard in that game against Buffalo. I think it was just a perfect storm of the 2s going against Buffalo's 1s, and then the 3s going against the 2s, and maybe some guys thinking a little bit too much out there. But I do think you want to see these guys take pride in what they're doing, show that effort, show that physicality, be better at tackling, because a lot of the guys that are going to play are not going to be starters. There's going to be very few guys out there that are going to be kind of major contributors, at least right off the bat. But I do think there's going to be guys that are going to have to step in at some point. You think back to last year's game in Cleveland when the inside linebacking core got really thin, and all of a sudden you had guys that were reserve players at the beginning of the season needing to play meaningful minutes. This is the chance for some of those guys to prove that they're up for that task. So that's kind of from a general big picture, 30,000-foot view. But then KJ Hamler, I just think it's been so long since we've seen him.
Yeah.
If he's able to go out there and get a couple catches, score a touchdown, just show that he's the KJ Hamler of old, still has that speed, that would be really encouraging, not just for him, but for the potential of this Broncos offense.
Will definitely be fun seeing KJ Hamler back out there. Hopefully it will be a fun day overall, and the Broncos get a win in their final preseason game. Eric, appreciate your time.
You got it.
We also heard from quarterback Brett Rypien earlier in the week about his start this Saturday and what he hopes to accomplish.
I mean, it's very exciting. Anytime you get an opportunity to start in this league, I don't care if it's a third preseason game or the Super Bowl, you're excited. So, it's been a hell of a camp. Been a lot of ups and downs, but I'm excited for this opportunity, and these guys are doing a great job out here. So I'm excited to play with some of these older guys too. I think I just want to get better. Honestly, that's the only thing I'm thinking of is how can I somehow get better this week and go out there and play like it's my last game ever. And really, that's the mentality I think you take into every single day. I think if there's one thing I've learned about the NFL, you can't take any day for granted out here. And I'm working my butt off every single day to try to be the best player I can possibly be. So when I go out on a Saturday, it's going to be the same thing.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's episode. Broncos Country, thanks so much for joining me here inside the UC Health Training Center for another edition of Broncos Now. Don't forget, kickoff is at 7 p.m. Mountain Time tomorrow. I hope to see you all at Empower Field at Mile High tomorrow for the game, but if not, I will see you right back here on the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube on Monday for another episode.